Hey everyone, Heero here, and today we're gonna look at Yaoguang, HSR's first Elation unit and support that uses buffs alongside new mechanics like AHA Instance to enable massive damage. I'll be discussing her kit, builds, Lightcones, and possible themes. Just as a quick disclaimer though, the footage and information shown is from the creator experience server, so some things could still change when her banner drops. Now, before we look at her kit, we first have to discuss the mechanics of the new Elation path, starting with the Elation stat and damage. Elation is a new stat that completely replaces damage percent buffs for any instance of Elation damage, like unit-specific abilities and AHA instances, as seen with the damage formula currently on screen. And it's important to note that damage percent and attack does not affect Elation damage. Now currently, there is no Elation main stat or substat, so the main way to get more Elation is unit-specific abilities. For example, Sparksy converts her total attack into Elation, while Yaoguang converts her speed, all while giving bonus Elation to her teammates. But now we can look at punchlines. Punchlines are the main backbone of the Elation path, with you mainly gaining them from unit-specific abilities or certain endgame buffs. Now there are two types of punchlines, normal punchlines and stored punchlines. Normal punchlines are gained through unit-specific skills and is indicated by this number next to the SP count, while stored punchlines are indicated by the number next to the Elation unit, and you can only gain them by entering the certified banger state, with normal punchlines only affecting the damage of Elation skills during AHA instance, while stored punchlines affect all Elation damage. Now, when you gain a normal punchline from any source, it causes AHA to appear in the action bar. And when their turn arrives, it triggers an AHA instant, causing every Elation character to trigger their Elation skills to deal damage and enter the certified banger state. But there are a lot of things to note about this. First, AHA speed is dependent on the amount of Elation units in your team and how much speed they currently have. For example, if you have a 160 speed Yaoguang and a 134 speed Sparksy, AHA will have a speed of 125.4. But if you only had Yaoguang, they would only have a speed of 112. Now, it's important to state that this isn't the full formula yet, since we can't confirm the specific denominator for the 3rd and 4th Elation units until they actually drop in-game. It's also worth noting that action advances do not work on AHA, and their action value does not reset between waves. And finally, like I said, after the AHA instance ends, it puts your Elation units in the certified banger state. This state consumes all normal punchlines and stores them in a 1-to-1 ratio on each Elation unit, after which it unlocks the talent of any Elation unit, which for now is what allows them to deal Elation damage outside of Elation skills. For example, the state allows Sparksy's ult and enhanced basics to deal Elation damage. However, just note, this damage will use the stored punchlines for damage calculation. And the certified banger state only lasts for 2 turns, with it causing all stored punchlines to also disappear when the state expires. But here's a quick TLDR on the Elation path's mechanics. First, you build punchlines until AHA's turn, after which an AHA instant triggers Elation skills and puts your characters into the certified banger state, consuming punchlines to store them with your units, which finally unlocks your Elation unit's ability to deal or enable Elation damage until the certified banger state ends and the gameplay loop repeats itself. But with the Elation mechanics out of the way, we can finally look at her kit. Let's first start with basics, which is your fairly standard blast attack. But the neat thing is, it regens 30 energy, and that's without an ER rope. But moving on to her skill, which deploys a 3-turn zone, with its duration decreasing every time Yaoguang takes a turn. When this zone is active, it gives an Elation buff to every ally based off 20% of Yaoguang's total Elation. Aside from this zone also allows each usage of Yaoguang's basic and skill to generate 3 punchlines, which of course is neat for SP positivity and punchline and energy generation. As for her ult, it's the most important part of her kit, and it does a couple of insane things. First of which is that it gives 5 punchlines while giving a 3-turn 20% rest spend buff. But more importantly, it immediately gives AHA an extra turn to trigger an AHA instant that has 20 fixed punchline. And there are some very neat things to note about this skill. First, this special AHA instant will still activate Elation skills and the certified banger state, while still storing the 20 fixed punchlines it used on your Elation units. Second, it does not consume any punchline when being activated. And finally, since this is an extra turn for AHA, it does not affect the action value of their next turn. So if you want, you can time Yaoguang's ult for a double AHA instant. So essentially, Yaoguang's ult is just a free AHA instant, Elation skill, and certified banger activation with a side of a 30% respend buff, which is pretty insane, especially when we inevitably get a full Elation team. But that brings us to her Elation skill, which I've shown a ton by this point, but it does a few neat things. First of all, it inflicts the Woe's Whisper debuff on all enemies, which causes them to take 16% more damage. After which it deals physical elation damage to all enemies, then deals 5 hits of physical elation damage to one random enemy. Now as for her talent, Yaoguang needs to be in the certified banger state to activate it. But as long as it's active, anytime an ally attacks, it will activate the Great Boon effect, which will deal an additional instance of elation damage with the same type as the attacker, even if they're not an elation unit. And if this attack consumes skill points, it deals a second instance of Great Boon for a total of 2 hits. But just note, if the attack that triggered it is an AoE, it will deal the elation damage to one random enemy that was hit by the attack. Now the neat thing is, if the unit that triggered it has a lower elation stat than Yaoguang, it would use her elation stat for damage calculation instead. Which is good since all non-elation DPSs will have a lower elation stat than her anyway. But as for her additional abilities, her first one with a very familiar name gives her a 30% elation buff when her speed is above 120, and for every speed above 120, she gains an additional 1% elation. This can consider up to 200 excess speed, meaning it needs an unrealistic 320 speed to max it out, but this is her main way of getting elation, so just get as much as you can. As for her A4 passive, it gives her a bonus 60% crit damage, and after using an elation skill, it recovers 1 SP for the party. Which of course is great since it makes her even more SP positive than she already is, especially if you can spam her ult. As for her A6 passive, every time Yaoguang enters the certified banger state, its duration increases by 1, going from lasting for 2 turns to 3. From my experience, thanks to this, Yaoguang will pretty much never leave the certified banger state. And finally for her technique, in the overworld, it gives up to 8 fortune packs per week whenever you destroy objects while it's active. While in battle, it just gives her a free skill at the start of combat, which is pretty simple. But for ability prio, I recommend leveling her ult and skill first, then her elation skill, then her talent, and finally her basics.
With her kit out of the way, we can talk about her Eidolons.
Yaoguang's E1 increases the fixed punchline from the AHA instant triggered by her ult to 40, while enabling all elation damage regardless of the source to ignore 20% of the enemy's defense. Overall, this is a pretty simple, yet pretty insane Eidolon. Not only does it enable faster stacking of punchline from Yaoguang's ult, but it also results in more elation damage resulting from the higher punchline stacking, ult's bonus AHA instant, and this Eidolon's defense ignore. While her E2 enables her zone to give an additional 12% speed and 16% elation buff while it's active. Overall, it's a pretty simple but decent buff. And since AHA's speed heavily depends on your elation units, it's something that could potentially get better when you can finally make a full team of them. As for her E4, it increases the damage of the elation skills triggered by the AHA instant from Yaoguang's ultimate by 150% of the original damage it dealt. Despite being a new unique multiplier, the damage of this is sadly limited by the 40 punchline cap from her E1. So regular elation skills can outdamage it with high enough punchline stacks or buffs. And finally, her E6, it merry makes all elation damage regardless of the source by 25%, while also increasing the damage multiplier of Yaoguang's elation skill by 100% of the original multiplier. This essentially is just more Yaoguang and team elation damage, which is neat.
With her Eidolons out of the way, let's talk about Lightcones.
Yaoguang's pretty signature increases the speed of the wearer by 18% just by equipping it. And when the wearer enters combat or uses an ultimate on an ally, the wearer gains the Great Fortune buff for 3 turns. While Great Fortune is active, it increases all allies' crit rate by 10%, crit damage by 30%, and her personal ER by 12%. And this is all on top of granting the wearer 15 energy at the start of each enemy wave. This of course is a pretty insane Lightcone for improving both Yaoguang's support utility and personal damage. It also allows her to get more turns while also enabling her to spam more ults for more AHA instants. Now sadly, since she is from a new path, there isn't really too many alternatives since all other Elation Lightcones are focused on a unit's personal damage output, and since Yaoguang is a support, you get more out of her by improving her utility. Which of course just leaves us with one alternative, which is this big mushroom over here, and it's pretty neat since you can also get it for free from the MOC shop. It basically just increases her elation by 20%, and whenever she uses an elation skill, she increases the elation damage taken by all enemies by 10% for 2 turns. Overall, it's a pretty decent option that improves her own damage as well as her own support utility.
But with her Lightcones out of the way, let's look at possible relics.
For relics, her best set is the new Diviner of Distant Reach, which gives a 6% speed buff with its 2-piece. But for its 4-piece, it gives her a personal crit rate buff based on her current speed, with it needing 160 speed for its full 18% crit rate buff. And after using her elation skill for the first time in battle, it enables her to give a permanent 10% elation buff for the whole battle. Overall, it's a set tailor-made for improving her utility, especially in elation teams. However, since it's new, you can just use any 2-piece combo of any speed set as a good temporary option. They of course give her lots of speed for lots of elation and turns for punchline stacking. As for planar sets, currently there is no elation-focused support planar, so Lushaka for its attack and ER buff is the best until we get one. And the neat thing is, despite elation damage not scaling with attack, even in a Sparksy team it's still viable since she converts attack into elation. However, if you don't want to use it, pretty much any supportive set can work for better utility, Fleet for an attack buff for Sparksy or a non-elation DPS, Broken Keel for more crit damage, or Von Whack if you want her to act first before high-speed allies or enemies. But out of all of these, however, I would still highly recommend Lushaka though.
With her possible sets out of the way, let's talk about stats.
Now she has a fairly average speed of 101, which gets boosted to 110 with her traces. But aside from this, her traces also gives her 18.7% crit rate and 10% elation, while her passive gives her 60% crit damage. So keep all of that in mind while building her. For main stats, any crit chest is great for damage, speed boots are mandatory for lots of turns for punchline and energy generation, and ER is also mandatory for spamming ults and AHA instances. And lastly for the orb, either HP or defense is the best option since elation damage does not get affected by damage percent buffs, so just use which one has the most speed and crit stats. As for substat priority, focus on speed first, then crit stats, and finally HP and defense for bulk since nothing else is useful. And if you're wondering why not give her attack, well, it's skills just like damage percent, attack does not affect elation damage. As for stat goals, I recommend going for a minimum of 160 speed to meet the Diviner's set speed goal. But of course, more is always better since Yaoguang converts speed into elation. Now, if you want to reach the 133.4 speed breakpoint on a team of Yaoguang and a 134 speed Sparksy, she will need 200 speed, which is pretty hard to do with or without her signature. So I don't really recommend it unless you're going for Sparksy and have godlike substat luck, especially since getting to 134 speed will become much easier once we get more elation units. As for crit rate, I recommend going for around 80 to 100% depending on your substat luck, and for crit damage, honestly, just get as much as you can. But I think 120 is a decent goal off battle, especially since Yaoguang gets a lot of crit damage from herself, and more if you run her with Sparksy.
But with her build out of the way, let's move on to possible teammates.
Yaoguang is pretty much the premier and cornerstone support for elation going forward. Not only does she provide a lot of elation for your units, she also helps ensure the uptime of Certified Banger while increasing the amount of AHA instances and elation skills triggered, all with her ult alone. This is all on top of her providing a pretty universal rest pen buff, a damage vulnerability debuff, and bonus crit from her S1. while also enabling other units, not just Elation ones, to deal Elation damage. But with that being said, her best team as of 4.0 is a team with Sparksy, Sparkle, and Donhong PT. Now Donhong can still be claimed until the end of patch 4.0, and I highly recommend claiming Sparkle from the free character selector if you wanna roll for Sparksy. This is because Sparksy is pretty SP hungry, so Sparkle would make this team much more comfortable to play, and she is getting buffed, so she's definitely a good pickup. Plus, having 2 Sparkles in the team sounds like paradise to me. But if you don't want to get her, then non-damage percent supports like 3B, Cypher, Silver Wolf, or Ruan Mei can work too, albeit just less comfy. As for Donhong, if you're already using him in another team, any sustain can work, but SP positive ones are preferred. But overall, in a nutshell, Yaoguang just helps Sparksy deal a ton of damage with her buffs and the bonus AHA instances. As for non-Elation teams, the most notable one is a team with Archer, which ironically also uses the exact same setup as Sparksy and can be considered as Yaoguang's best free-to-play team. Post-buff Sparkle is already a massive buff to him, with her generating more SP and her buffs now being stronger and fully available without a full quantum team. But with Yaoguang, it enables him to do pretty funny things, especially in Elation week content. For example, if you do a full 5 Archer skill turn, you end up doing 15 damage instances, 10 of which are Elation hits that scale off Yaoguang's Elation stat, so it ends up dealing a ton of Elation damage. As for non-Archer teams, you can use her in a lot of non-Elation teams if you're tackling any Elation week content. Pretty much anyone can benefit from her rest spend and damage vulnerability debuff, and if you have her S1, the crit buffs it brings. Plus, due to her Elation mechanics and her letting anyone deal Elation damage, she enables some teams to better deal with endgame stages with Elation shield mechanics and modifiers like those found in the upcoming MOC, Apocalyptic Shadow, and Pure Fiction stages. And judging from Hoyo's trends, the 4.x patches is probably gonna be filled with these Elation week content. However, for non-Elation week stages, I would honestly recommend you to use supports other than Yaoguang instead due to their more substantial buffs. And there are some DPSs like Finon, Break, or DOT units that I don't really recommend to Yaoguang simply due to how they're built or how they work. But that's about it. Personally, I'm definitely gonna be pulling because I wanna go all in for the best Sparksy team to achieve absolute elation. But anyway, make sure to tell me what you think about her in the comments below, and don't forget to hit me with a like and a sub. Now, onto the showcase, and as usual, forgive my skill issue, I'm pretty terrible at this game due to my aging motor skills.